All right, what's up everyone? This is Don with Third Creative, and this is the walkthrough tutorial video for Showcase Multi-Sport Photoshop template. In this video, I'm going to walk you through all of the layers, the processes, and hopefully cover anything and everything that you might need to know in order to create the best images possible using this design. I did put a lot of options and little bells and whistles in this design, so it's going to be pretty thorough. So if you are here because you are looking for something specific, feel free to scrub through, find what you need, and jump back out so you can get back to work. I'm going to be using the 4x5 vertical file for this video. Just keep in mind that everything that I cover relates and pertains or is consistent with the other files as well. There's a few unique and specific things about the horizontal files and the memory mate that I will touch on at the very end of the video before I wrap it up. But let's jump into it. First thing, I've been leading my videos with this recently, and that's just a little tip, which is to familiarize yourself with a template. You're probably going to want to jump in, immediately find specific things that you want to change. So if you just go in and start clicking on these little eyeball icons here, you can turn off and on layer folders, which allows you to see where everything is hiding. I say hiding because sometimes things are difficult to find. This can only help, keeping in mind that there are subfolders within the folders, and occasionally there's even subfolders inside of subfolders. I promise you I'm not trying to hide things from you and make it difficult. Sometimes there's just a give and a take between bells and whistles and having cool options versus simplicity. So take it for what it's worth. That's my tip. Let's start at the bottom, which is where I like to start. We have our background layers folder. So again, if we turn it off, you can see what is in that folder. If we open it up, we've got a couple subfolders. We've got vertical text layers, and so you can see if I turn that off, we've got these text layers that are here on the side. We also have our select sport option. So you won't be able to really tell by looking at this, but basically, if you've used my templates before, this is a very similar setup. You turn off the sport option if you're not using it. In this case, by default, it's softball. Find the sport that you want, which is, let's just say soccer, and you can turn that on. And then down here we have our change background color. So let's dig just a little bit deeper. For those of you who are very new to this, changing the color with a color overlay like you see here, very simple. You'll double click on this icon. In this case it's yellow by default. It'll bring up your color picker. From here you have the slider, unless you have a specific code that color code that you can enter, but use the slider to find the correct color that you're looking for. And then from there you can click anywhere in this box to find the specific brightness, darkness, level of saturation that you're going for. If you have a uniform, you can come over here with your little eyedropper and you can sample to get you a good starting point if there's a color in the uniform that you want to use. So a little crash course on that. Back to the sport options. In the default mode, I guess you'll say, it's extremely subtle. There's a lot of ways that you can do this, but the color that I selected is just slightly darker than the background color, and that's because sometimes you don't want it to be super distracting. Sometimes it works to have a lot of contrast. In this case, there isn't a lot of contrast, just enough where you can notice, but it is extremely subtle. Once you've selected the sport that you want, if you want to change the color, it's very simple. You'll see color overlays on all of these. Just double click and you'll see a little box here that you can click on, and again, we're in the color picker, so find the color you want, find the lightness and darkness. If you've already have a code that you were using for the background color, you can paste that code in here as a starting point and then just get a little bit darker, or if you want a little bit lighter, or if you want something completely contrasting, you would just change the color like that. You can actually adjust these. So you'll notice I went up here and I selected my move tool, and now the layer that I have selected is now highlighted. You can click on an anchor point, and then if you hover to where you see this curved arrow, you can rotate. If you want it smaller, you can click and drag in. I have to hold down Shift to maintain proportions. Depending on what your settings are, you may not have to do that. But if it does something like this, then let go, hit this little circle with a line through it, start over, hold down Shift. You can drag outward, you can drag in, and then again you can rotate it. Now, you may start off with the way it is, finish customizing the template, and then decide you need to come back and adjust it. But just to give you an idea, we'll jump over to some sample images on the website. You can see here I have extreme contrast. I have white on black, and then on some of these others it's very subtle. This football one you see is extremely subtle. We have lacrosse here, which is kind of in between with the contrast, but you have options. But just to give you some samples, here is a good example of me creating an image for a sport that doesn't have a specific element for that sport. There is not a cheer element, but you can turn these off, and I think it still can be a great option for a lot of other sports or activities that I haven't included a sport-specific background element for. But yeah, you can always adjust this, and you can change the color. I guess what we haven't covered, and you may or may not already know, but there are 10 sport options. I should probably have made the contrast on this a little more so that it was easier to see without zooming in, but you can kind of see it's just showing the edge of each sport. So of course we start off with softball, we have wrestling, you can see here, we have volleyball, we have soccer, we have lacrosse, which you can kind of see the goal here. We also have hockey, and I'm kind of moving this around, but I just hoping you can see football. And then in football, I kind of have it where you see the hash marks, and then these are the 5-yard lines. You should be able to get the idea. Of course, basketball, you can see, and what do we have? Baseball, which it's kind of covering up the base here, but you see the lines, and then this last one here we have is tennis. So those are the 10 specific sport options that are in this little drop-down folder. Let's move on to the next folder, which is vertical text layers, change color. So from here you can change the color from the folder here if you want the color to be exactly the same on both sides. And so you would just double click color overlay. Again, we've already covered that. By default there is an inner shadow. So I'm going to zoom in just so we can kind of see this subtle detail. We have our inner shadow. Well, there's actually two. So if I turn one off, it takes away. One's a little softer and one's a little sharper, but you can turn them both off, have one or the other on. Also, there is a stroke that is turned off by default. Any of these stroke or inner shadows you can adjust or manipulate. So just by double clicking on whichever one you want will bring up your layer style, and then you can see with these check marks which ones I have included here, and so you can just go through each one and make the adjustments you want. So for example, if you want the stroke to be a little thinner, you would decrease the size value. You can get it to be pretty subtle, or maybe you want it thicker, maybe not that thick, but you get the idea. Same thing with the inner shadow. You can adjust the size, the distance, the opacity. You can really fine-tune this to get a look that you like. If you want anything to be different from the left versus the right, then you would want to turn these off, and you would want to make the adjustments independently on each text layer. More than likely you're going to want them to match, so that makes it easier on you. This can be scaled. So let's see here. just so that it's a little easier to see, I'm going to pick a blue color here. And now we have contrast. Now, I kind of felt like it's real easy to get too busy with this design. So, you know, it's a matter of opinion or taste, but you want to be careful. So on my sample images, if I left this side border text large, I would keep the contrast at a very minimum. So if I back up like this, so it's not super distracting. If I did go with a color that does contrast quite a bit, let's redo that. Then what I would do is scale these down. Now, there's probably several ways that you could do this, but if you select the folder in your layer panel and you click on a corner anchor point, and I'm going to hold down Shift, I can scale this down, and then I can move this to the edge. I can scale up or down, get a size that I like. And a little thing that I was doing was kind of putting one up high on the left, not too big, not too small. And then I would go down here and select this bottom one, which is now you can't see. But if you click on the little anchor point in the corner, then click and drag anywhere inside the rectangle, you can position it where you want. Now you can do it by eye, but if you really want it to be super centered, once you have them kind of in place, if you go back up here and select the folder that contains both text layers, you can hit Control or Command A to select the canvas. You can also come up to select all, and then with your move tool selected right here, you'll see, let's get this out of the way, you'll see these little arrows. So what we want is a vertical, a horizontal center. So if you click this here, you could barely tell, but it shifted it so that it's perfectly center, and that makes sure that the distance between this white border and the text is exactly the same on both sides. So something that most people may not even notice, but if you want everything just right, that's how you would do it. And that, I think, pretty much covers everything. Let's back it up and get it to its original state. There we go. We'll close this up, and we will close up the background layer folder and move on to the next folder, which is center column layers. Let's open this one up. This is one that has a lot of subfolders inside subfolders, but we'll get into it. I had to set this up a little bit differently to give you a few options. As you notice here, there is a glow, outer glow on some specific layers, so I needed to have those layers in a specific folder, and I've got textures and all kinds of things going on. Some layers are in front of the subject, some are in the back, so I wasn't able to put all of the text layers in the same spot, but we'll get to that. Let's just start at the top here. We have, right off the bat, we've got our year, so it's down here at your, well, at the very bottom in the middle on top of this stripe. Very simple to change the color. If you have your character panel showing, there's always a color picker here. Otherwise, you can double click the T on this icon to select the entire text, in which you can come up here or here. You've got all kinds of places where you can change the color. And for a while, you should be able to leave it as just 2025. Now, there's a few different looks you can get with this. You could actually turn this off, and you could include the year on the side text. I did that. Maybe you want to include it up in this upper text. You can move it anywhere. If it's not something with a junior, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior classification, you could use this for the year. You can put the year anywhere that you like, but by default, this is how we have it set up. Next, we'll look at the subject frames and text layers, outer glow optional. So since we're on the subject of outer glow, I thought outer glow on these layers looked really good with this color scheme. However, when I'm making sample images, I had a feeling, but I was able to confirm that it doesn't necessarily look good on every color scheme. And so if you decide that your color scheme, you're not liking it, you can simply just turn off right here the outer glow and go with a little cleaner more standard look. Now you'll notice there's outer glow on the first name. That's because I had to put it in a folder up here, but you can do the same thing by coming up here into the first and last name, and there's the outer glow right there, and you can turn it off. So you have options there, and you just have to decide if it does or does not look good to you. So if I turn this off, you can see everything that's inside this folder. It's basically the frame and the text. Everything that's glowing that you see here is in this folder. Down here we have our center column layer, so that's everything behind this frame. Our stripes, our main color, the texture that is very subtle, but if I zoom in you can kind of see that there is a texture there. But I'll just turn it off so you can see what we lose. You might even be able to get a kind of a cool look, you know, without the center columns, which I didn't even really think about that, but play around with it. You don't have to use these things like they come right out of the box. I like to use that Lego set analogy. You can build what's on the cover, or you can make something completely different. Use your imagination. We'll turn that back on. So let's dig a little deeper. We've got, actually I need to touch on this. I use drop shadow a little bit differently. I used it as an extra level of outer glow. So if I put them on together, you can kind of see. If I turn off the drop shadow, it takes away from the edge. So I just decided to do that just to kind of give it a little extra dimension, I guess you would say. So if you turn off outer glow, you're going to want to turn off drop shadow as well to get a super clean edge line. And then we have an inner shadow, which is very subtle. You know, that maybe on a banner, if people are walking up, they'll notice this, but you can decide if you want to turn that off or if you want to leave that on. Of course, any of these you can fine tune, again, simply just by clicking on whichever style that it is that you're wanting to adjust. We have our inner shadow with distance, size, opacity. Of course, our glow, you can play with the color. If you change the color, by default I have this blue, so you may want to find a color that works with the background color that you select. And you just want to play around with it. Usually you're going to want to stay at the top of this square here. So you want the lightest color possible. It's just a question of how much saturation you want. So I know this doesn't look good, but just for the purpose of demonstration, let's say if we had a green background, you could just start playing around and just finding the level of saturation that looks good to you. And of course you can adjust the spread. You can get carried away. You can adjust the size. Just find levels that look good for the color that you've selected. I had to go with something that I thought would look good for the most part across the board, but you'll notice that once you change the color, it might need a little fine tuning. Let's go into this folder and see what we have. So here we've got our lower text, subtext, and I put in parentheses varsity. Let's talk about that real quick. So you may not be using this for high school, and if you are using it for high school, you may use it for more than just varsity. So this can be changed. Before we open up the folder here, we have a color overlay. So you can adjust or change. Let's see here. Okay, we've got one there too. All right, that explains that. So if you want everything to be the same color, which when I say everything, I just mean these accent lines on the side and the text, then you can stick with this color overlay that is on the folder itself. Now you'll also notice that there's an outer glow. I don't know if this was overkill or not. There might be somebody out there that that feels like a standard level of outer glow for everything in this folder, you know, doesn't look right, but they still want the outer glow. So I made it where you can control the outer glow independently on each text, the whole border frame, this text. So if you want to go into that kind of detail, you would come up here to, I guess we'll call it the master folder, and you would turn off the outer glow there, and then you could come down and turn on the outer glow on each layer independently and adjust it accordingly. I have a feeling most of you won't do that, but I put it in there nonetheless. So we'll turn that back off. Here we have subtext option 1, and so let's look at this a little closer. And this is the first time this has come up, so let me go ahead and I guess touch on that real quick. This particular font, I guess it's pronounced Buianton, is an excellent font. It's one of my favorite fonts. In fact, you've been seeing it a lot recently in the templates and the work that I've been putting out. I love fonts. The problem is that a lot of the great fonts are not free for commercial use. The last thing I want to do is add an extra expense, but I sometimes feel strongly with my font selection, and so I have by default put Buianton here as the default text. Currently at Creative Market, a commercial license is $22. I looked at it when I was setting this up on the site. It was on sale for $18, but I think it's worth it. In fact, I use it on a lot of templates, so purchasing it once will cover all of the templates that I use it in, but I always offer an alternative. So I have Buianton with a commercial license required in red. If we turn that off, turn this alternate option on, which is Coors Script. It's very similar. It just doesn't have quite as much options. And I won't get too deep into this, but if I select Buianton and I come up here to my glyphs, you can see all of these options that you have within this font. Little accents, and we'll get to it, but you'll see little swashes, swooshes, tails, all sorts of things. So you can really finesse this. You see how I have Varsity set up with this. That's not the default Y, but you've got all of these options. And so with Coors, you're a lot more limited, but you can still get a very similar look, and it looks good. Those are the two options. Of course, changing the color, same thing. You come up here, pick any color that you want, which I forgot I have this color overlay turned on here. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. And let's see. You get the idea. So you can change it. And let's see. Let's say, for example, that this is going to be Junior Varsity. I guess before I get too far, let me get it back. All right, we've got our color on. Okay, let's say we want to change this. So I'm going to add Junior to this. So now, whoops. So now we have Junior Varsity, but our accent lines, which are in this subfolder down here, they're not lined up right. So you can come in, select one. Now you can use your left arrow key, but it's extremely slow, left or right arrow key. So what I do is I zoom in and I click on one of these corner anchor points. I hold down Shift and I click anywhere in the middle, and I move it out roughly where I would want it. And then I would come to this second layer and I would repeat. Holding down Shift will keep it at the same height level so it doesn't look wonky. Once you have it, again, you can center it perfectly if you select the folder that both layers are contained in. Controller Command A to select the entire canvas, and then we want to do this horizontally, so we would click this right here. I had it pretty close because it barely moved. But just make sure you deselect or hit Controller Command D to get rid of the marching ants, or you'll run into problems. There you go. That's how you're able to change this subtext at the very bottom. Next, we have our upper subtext. So here you have some options. I have it spaced so that it fits, right in here just right. But if you go with something much smaller, let's say Bulls basketball, you can leave it like that. Or maybe you want to increase it just a little bit. We'll go with 30. Or you could come over here. This is all in the character panel. You can adjust your kerning. Currently, it's at 600, so maybe you want it a little wider. You could try 700. Play around with it, and you can get it how you like it. Let's see. We'll back that up. There we go. Next, we have our lower subtext classification. So we're going to go down here. So this is referring to junior. If we open this up, you can see, actually I'm in the wrong folder. If we open this up, you can see we have senior, junior, sophomore, freshman. So I do this knowing that a lot of you are using automation, and so you would just change the name of one layer and just use one single layer for everything. But similar to this text up here, you can adjust the size, you can adjust the kerning, of course you can adjust the color up here, go with any color that you're looking for, play around with it, and if it's not a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, you can turn it off, or you can change it to say anything that you want. But that's pretty simple. Again, it has its own outer glow that's turned off that you can turn on if you want to control it independently. All right, moving right along. Next, we have our vertical accent text options. So the other set of vertical text is what I'm referring to here. So you'll see where it says legacy on both sides. If we open this up, again, we have our Boolean, which requires commercial license, and we have our free alternate, which is Coors. So you would want to turn off the one you don't want to use, turn on the one that you do. If you open up the subfolder, you'll see that we have two. So you would just want to update. So I'm going to just type in Mavericks. Now, you can go in here and select a specific letter, and now my glyphs show up underneath here, but you could also come up here and click on your glyphs to see what options you have. But you can play around with it, and if there's a different one that you like a little better, you can change it. And it's other letters as well, so you can kind of look and see just ways to stylize it or spice it up a little bit. But just know that that's an option. Once you have it how you want it, what I do is just double click the T on the respective layer, and now I'm going to hit Control or Command C to copy that text. Then you can come down to the one below it, double click on this T, and we're going to hit Control or Command V to paste it. Now, you'll notice that they're not necessarily lined up perfectly. If you need to center them, again, come up to the folder that they're both inside and have it selected. And I'm going to hit Control or Command A to select all, and we'll hit the vertical center. Maybe I need to, okay. You actually need to select both text layers and do that. There we go. Sorry. Once you've done that, hit Control or Command D to deselect, and then you can move it where you want it. Now you can see that it's a little too big for the space that we have here. So I'm going to touch on that since we're on the subject, the layer folder just below it, which says Subject Border. Frame layers, change color. If you turn it off, you can see it's this frame. Now you notice it has a layer mask, and that's what creates this little opening that we can hardly see currently. But if you want to adjust that, there's a little chain link right here. Click on that and make sure if I click over here, or here. Now the entire layer folder is selected, but if you click on the layer mask icon specifically and you see that it's highlighted, that lets you know that you are working with the layer mask only. So since we've unlocked it and we have the layer mask selected, we get this transform box. And so what you can do is click on an anchor point and drag up. You can do the same thing on the bottom, click and drag down to get the right spacing for your new accent text. And that's how you would update the text and get everything lined up and centered. Now, if you've already looked at some of the sample images, you will notice that on some of the sample images I did a little differently. So this first one right here, for example, you can create something like this, and it's similar to what I demonstrated on this vertical text that's on the edges, but I will kind of walk you through it again real quick. I'm going to turn off the outer glow, and I'm just going to keep them the same size, I'm going to have both text layers selected, or you can select the folder. I'm going to click on an anchor point, hold down shift, and I'm going to scale it up real big. You can bring it over. I'm going to hold down shift, click, scale up, click anywhere in here. I'm going to do this very quickly, but you can position it how you want it. Now, once you have it, hit the check mark, come over here to your layer panel and select the other one. I'm going to pan out so that I can see it on my screen here. I'm going to click one of the anchor points, hold down shift, drag, and position it. Now you can get it relatively close, and again we can do the centering trick. I have a Wacom tablet, and so I actually have it programmed into one of my buttons, so if I just push the button it'll do it. But again, select A to select the entire canvas, come up here and do the horizontal centers, and then Control or Command D to deselect. That doesn't look great, but I think it serves the purpose as far as explaining how you would do something like this. You can adjust them how you think it looks good. In fact, if your frame, and I'm just kind of all over the place, but if your frame was a different color, so let's pick a yellow. Oh, it went black. I don't know why that's not cooperating, but let's just manually pick a yellow. So let's say you have a frame different from your accent text. Now it might look good the way that it is, but you might decide that it looks good with the accent text underneath the frame. So in that case, you could take this entire folder with the layer mask on it, drag it down. Now if you see the whole layer folder highlighted like that, don't let go yet. It's going to put it inside that folder. We want it to where you have a line just underneath, and let go. Oh, actually it went out. You can see how it's further to the left, so we'll bring it up. There, it's inside the subfolder, but it's underneath, and now our frame is over our accent text. I know this is super thorough, but I warned you it would be. It's just options, so you don't have to do all of this. You can keep it simple and leave it the way it is right out of the box. But if you want this look, that's how you would achieve it. What else have we not covered? If you open up this subject border frame layer, change color. If I turn it off, you can see it's the border frame. You'll see that it's comprised of a subfolder, which is corner accents. If I turn that off, you see the little squares in the corners. If you don't like that, you would just come in here and you would turn that off. It kind of gives off the baseball, softball vibes, like bases, but I think it can still work for other sports. It's just a personal taste or preference on whether you want to turn them off or leave them on if you're not doing baseball or softball. And then down here we've got our rectangle frame. It's just a shape layer with a stroke. So to change the color of that, you could come into the stroke and change it there if you want it to be independent, but I also have this color on the folder itself. Hope all that makes sense. And then down here we have our vertical accent, which we've kind of already covered that. And then we have our center column layer. So let's look at that real quick. This one's a little easier, a little simpler. So this is an optional texture. If you zoom in, you'll see the textures there. It's very subtle. You can turn it off, you can turn it on. If you change the color of this background and you can't really see the texture or maybe see it too much, you can play with the opacity. It's at 77%. You can increase it, decrease it. You can also double click on this levels adjustment and move these sliders. If you want it to be a little bolder, move these over to the right. You can see you got that contrast. You can fine tune it that way. Completely up to you. Next we have our center column and our stripes. So if I open this up, this texture applies to this blue column and also the stripes. We'll open it up to take a look. So this is where we have our upper and lower stripes. If I turn it off, turn it on. I have it set up where they are not all the same color. If you want them all to be the same color, just turn this color overlay on, and then you only have to select the color one time. But if you want them to be independent like they are by default, then you would just open up this layer folder. We've got our left, our middle, and our right. And so if you already have a code, great. You just click on this, paste it in. Otherwise, once you do the first one, you can copy this code and then come over to, well, I guess I didn't label that one as the right, but it is the right. And then you would just paste the code in to have the same color. And same thing for the middle. You can control them all independently. If you want to adjust how shallow or high or low they are, you can unlock the layer mask and select it. And like I was showing you earlier, you can bring them up, bring them down. Another option, we'll cancel that. If you want them larger or smaller, you can open this up. You can select, hold down Shift, and click down here to select all three. Now I'm going to hold down Shift and Option so that they stay centered. Click and drag out. You can make them as big and wide or smaller, which by making them smaller, you'll see they go off, so I might have to let go of Shift and Option and just make them longer. So many options. So thorough, like I said it would be. Next we have our center column, change color. So if I turn it off, you can see we lose the color. If you double click here, you can see this is where we get the blue, and you can change the color to anything you want. And then I have this set up rather than a stroke outline, it's just another shape layer that is this border. Double click on the color overlay and you can make it any color that you want to. They do have drop shadows that you can manipulate or fine tune if you want to. If you want this border to be wider or narrower, with it selected, using your move tool, click on any of these anchor points, hold down Shift, and you can click and drag. Well, I'm on a Mac, I'm going to hold down Shift and Option, click and drag out or in to make it larger or smaller. More than likely you won't need to do that, but you can if you want to, or if you feel that it will look better. All right, that was the big one that I knew would take quite a bit of time. Let's get this back to original state. There we go. Next we have our subject images. This one's very simple, straightforward. Drop in your subject images, scale and position them how you want them. I have a built-in drop shadow, so if I turn that off, you can see you lose that effect. You can double click on the word drop shadow, play with the opacity. You can even get crazy and play with blend modes and color, distance, size, etc. But try to find a nice sweet spot that would work. There is a gradient mask, and that is what, if I come up here and wrong one. Turn this one off. You can see what creates the fade. Quick crash course on adjusting this. Simplest, easiest way is probably to click on this little chain link icon to unlock it. Make sure that you have the layer mask selected. You see it's highlighted. Make sure you have your move tool, and you can click and drag this up or down. If you want it to be more gradual, you can drag it down and even hold down shift to move it up. But that's an easy way to adjust it. Undo that, and then of course with your layer mask selected, you can redo it using your gradient tool. Always make sure you have black to white, white to black. I always do this backwards, but basically hold down shift, click and drag. Hey, if I hold down shift to lock it into place so it's straight, get it where you like it, let go. If you decide you want to adjust it, then it's the same thing. Click on either side. If you hold down shift, it should keep it straight, and you can adjust it. So let's undo that. All right, we're getting there. Next we have close. There we go. We have first and last name layers. I'll turn that off, turn it on. You see what we're working with. So we have a subfolder in here for first name. It has outer glow on it. If you don't want outer glow on, you can turn it off. If you want it on, you can leave it on, and you can double click the word outer glow, change the color, opacity, spread, size, etc. to your liking. If you decide not to go with outer glow, and in this case it worked out well because the pants are the same color for the most part as the background, so white just stands out. But if you need a little help creating some contrast, you can turn on this drop shadow. It's very hard to see here because it's already very dark behind it, but if these were white pants with a white background, you would notice more. And again, you can double click the word drop shadow and adjust the opacity, distance, size, get it to where you like it. If we open it up, we have some options. First name, option 1. This is Babus New. If you turn it off, we can go with Buoyanton. Turn that off. We can go with Course Script. So you have a few options there depending on the look that you want. Changing the color is the same. Very simple. Let's see. Let's close that up. Okay. Here we have our last name, and I have that same texture as the background clipped to the last name. So you can play with the levels, you can play with the opacity if you want, you can turn it off if you don't want the texture at all. This is also clipped to the last name, which is an optional highlight on the last name. I have the opacity only at 15%, but just so you can see what it's doing, I'm going to increase the opacity. And you can see it's adding a highlight at the top. I wanted it super subtle, but you can adjust the opacity once you select the color to get it to look just right if you feel that it needs it. Again, you can turn that off as well. It's optional. Here we have our last name options. There's a drop shadow that can be adjusted if you want to, especially if this were a light white bright background. The current drop shadow might be a little too dark, so you just want to go in here and adjust these two. This one, probably the bottom one more so, because that's where most of it's coming from. Here I've got 4 options in here, and they're all free for personal or commercial use, excuse me. So we've got option 1, which is default. We've got option 2, which I think looks good for like maybe baseball. We've got a more traditional sport, collegiate, school type font, and then we have a 4th option to get a little more of a modern look. So you can pick from any of these. These are just suggestions. I try to give you options that are built in, but you're in control of the fonts. You can use any font of your choice, completely up to you. So you don't always have to use what I put in here. But those are your font options, and I think that's it there. I'm trying to think. Anything else I need to cover about the first and last name? I don't think so. Next we have our floating border letters. Change color. So if you want all of these border letters to be the same color, you would control it right here on the folder itself. Click on color overlay, get the color that you want. Very simple. It also has a drop shadow that can be adjusted. And if we open it up, basically what you'll see is, what is it, 6 smart objects, and I've labeled them top left, top right. That way if you want to move one, you can use your move tool. If you need to move it, you can. If you want to scale it smaller or larger, you can. You can control it like that. So let's see. There is motion blur. That is a smart filter that is on each of these. You can turn that off, which I'll do real quick. If you just want them nice and clean, that is an option. If you want to adjust the motion blur, you can do that simply by double clicking on the word motion blur, and right now it's set to 40 and I have this angle. You can go stronger, less strong, adjust the angle, get it to your liking. Once you have it the way that you like it, you can, let's see here, you would delete all of these smart filters, delete, go through, and then you could click, hold down option and drag to each one to apply them if you want them all the same. Again, super thorough. More than likely you won't be needing to do that. To change the letter, it is a smart object. So just start with the top one, double click on it, and it opens this up. So you can, I've got it at an angle. I probably should have made it straight and then rotated them all, but it's okay. I'm going to go with just an M, for example. We'll hit the check mark. Now it's running off of the canvas, so that won't be good. We want to center it. No big deal. We can scale it down. I guess let me hit enter here. Can scale it down to fit. There's different ways that you can do that with the anchors here. Once you have it on there, how you like it, you can go ahead and close this out and hit save, and it'll go back. Before I do that, I want to show you one thing. If you want to change the color, or excuse me, if you want a stroke, you would turn this on, and then you would want to change the color here. So let's say that's the color scheme that you want. Once you get it how you like it, go ahead and hit OK. And we'll go ahead and X out. Now make sure that you hit save. Everything will transfer over. This is not going to look good. In fact, you're not even going to notice, but this is part of it. You would want to turn this color overlay on the actual layer folder off so that you can see that with a stroke. I didn't want to set it up that way, but what I noticed is if I put a stroke on here, the motion blur wasn't applying. The motion blur is a smart filter. It has to be on a smart object, and so it looked weird where the inside of it was blurry, but the stroke outline was crisp and clean. It just didn't work. And so if you want to add the stroke, you'll just have to do everything here, close it out, and then turn off the color overlay. You get the idea. Okay, almost done. We've got optional color grade warm contrast. So this is optional. If I turn it off, you can see it's very subtle, but it adds a little warmth and a little punch. You might like it, you might not. So if you notice a little warmth in your image that maybe you think shouldn't be there, that's what is causing it. So if you like it, you can leave it. If you want a little less, you can reduce this opacity number, or you can increase it. Just know that a little bit goes a long way. So 100% looks like that. Not good. So just be careful not to overdo it. All right, we're at the end of the road here, at least for this file. We've got a couple vignettes. So this one is levels. If you double click on this icon, you'll get this properties window. You can click and drag this to control the darks. Just keep in mind that if you control the darks this way, it does severely boost the saturation. So you may not want to get too carried away with that, but you can adjust it a little bit with the levels, because I wanted a little bit of saturation boost that comes with, a normal vignette. But really most of it is coming from this top one, which is your exposure. So if I double click on that in your properties, you can click this and drag this top one to make it darker or lighter. It just kind of draws you in. And then if I zoom out and I select, I can get it to cooperate here. And if I select it, you can see the edge of it. And so I can actually, just keep in mind this is over everything, so you can scale it down where it goes a little more into the image, and you can increase it if you want to. And the reason I'm covering that is because I did that on this one right here. I brought it in and I darkened it to really kind of draw you in. Since it's already dark, I had to make it a little more extreme so that it would be noticeable. All right, that was ridiculously thorough. A couple other things to touch on with the horizontal and the memory mate. We'll do that real quick so we can wrap this up. Okay, now I have the 5x4 horizontal file pulled up. Just a couple things that I want to touch on. One is going to be in the very bottom folder in the background layers. If we come down to select sport option, I'm going to turn these on. You're going to see these wonky looking layer masks on here. And so if I were to turn that layer mask off, it might show you why they're there. Okay, so I never opened any of these up. This is the smart object. This is what I have in here to create this effect. And you don't want it to show up through your subject's legs. And so the way I have my subjects, it kind of fits inside the baseline, but there's this extra stuff going on. And so that's why I created the layer masks that you see here, and I've applied it to all of them. But once you put your subject images in there, these layer masks might need a little bit of tweaking. It's very simple. Make sure you select the layer mask. You want to go to your brush, and what I would do is go to, well, let's see, under general brushes, and use soft round. And so your hardness, you'd want it 0, and then the size, I use my right and left bracket key, maybe something like so. So for those of you who don't know, white reveals. So if I use white, it'll show what is masked out, and if I use black, it'll mask out more. So using black, you can, well, if I can get it to, oh, I see, my opacity's at, yeah, don't have your opacity at 20% and your flow at 20%. Okay, so you can see I just masked a bunch of that out. So you can reduce your opacity and flow a little bit so that it, isn't so drastic. But if I were to want to add in a little bit more, I would use white, and I could paint in what I want. And if anything was overlapping, you would select your black and just paint out anywhere that you don't want it to show through their legs. So same thing applies to all of these. Just use the soft round brush, 100% opacity, or you can draw it down a little bit for a little more subtle effect, but it applies to all of these if you need to adjust it. The other thing that I would touch on is this is set up for 2 rows, which is one below the text, one above the text. If you want to do a single row, what you could do is this center column layer folder. If you open it up and you scroll down, this one in red is your upper subject row. You can turn that off. Okay. Now, if you select the entire folder and use your move tool, you can use your arrow key up, or you can just click on an anchor point and then hold down shift and click and drag this up as far as you want. Get it however high you need it, and then you can have your subjects. You can have multiple rows if you want to build rows. You can set everything up below it, but that's basically what you would do. I think I had a sample in here. Okay, so yeah, I did that for this baseball team, which was just a demonstration that if you turn the layer mask off, it's on your subject folder. So we'll use this one for example. If I hold down shift and hit the X, turn the layer mask off, you can see that you can do that if you use a service that adds shadows, or if you want to do them yourself, that's an option. But you don't have to do the double row if it doesn't work. I think that's it. Yeah. So what else? We needed to touch on the memory mate. I always like to explain how the memory mates work, but if you've ever used them before, you already know. But we'll do that and we'll wrap it up. All right, I've got the memory mate pulled up, and really all I'm going to do is show you how we get our team image in here. You want to start with the 5x4 file that we just talked about, and you want to build your team image. You want to save it as a JPEG, and once you have your team image created, you can use this memory mate file to get your your team image in here. I'm going to show you how to do that. I have a sample one in here. I'm just going to delete that. So now we're going to assume that I've just created this, and now it's time to add my team image. So I'm going to bring this over where we can see it. All right, so I'm just going to click, drag, and drop. And it's going to put it in here. Now before I hit the check mark, I'm going to hold down shift and scale and position it how I want it. Let's just say something like that. Once you get it how you want it, hit enter or click that check mark at the top. Now I think the only problem is that it put it just above the subject folder because I had the subject folder selected. So we do need to click and drag and drop into the folder, and that way the drop shadow will apply. But that is how you would add the team image. Now you may want your subject to be on the opposite side, so you can always place it on the left, and then up here in your subject image folder you would position and scale them on this side. Pretty simple, and that's it. So we might be pushing for the record on the longest tutorial video, but it's always a thing, super long, and it's just because I'm super thorough, because I understand that not all of you have the same experience or skill level in Photoshop. Some of you may be brand new to my templates or templates as a whole, so I just want to cover anything and everything, knowing that a lot of it is going to be overkill. But who knows, maybe there's something that I didn't cover, and if that's the case, reach out. You can email me at don@thirdcreative.com. I will get back to you as quickly as I can. I'm always happy to help if I can help. But that is all for this one. Time to get started on the next one, and until then, we'll see you.